Hey everyone, it's Keith again from St. Paul's Church in Tombstone, Arizona. As you can see, I also wear a uniform, so I have a couple of jobs, one full-time chaplain and then also ministering at the church in Tombstone. But what I'd like to talk about on this very cold afternoon in Arizona, I want to talk about some lessons that I've learned when ministering to people who are near death. And it's a very important topic, I think, for priests to understand. And when I was in seminary, though, I did not have very good training on this matter. But I think perhaps the best way to learn is by talking to those who have been through the experience, the other ministers who have dealt with it, and just to hear it, because every case is going to be different. Each time you get the opportunity will have its own dynamics, which are different from the previous. So, first time I ever got to minister with someone about to pass away was a terminal cancer patient. Right after I got out of seminary, there was a gentleman who started coming out to the church, and one day after service, he introduced himself to me and told me that he had terminal cancer with only a matter of months to live, but he wanted to make sure that, you know, his soul was ready to go meet his maker. So over the next few months, we had a wonderful time getting acquainted. I drove out to visit him at his house. I would pray with him. Eventually, he got weaker and weaker. His health deteriorated. And what was meaningful to him, one time he asked me to start bringing him communion. And so I said, okay. And so I did that. I never thought about doing that before. No one ever advised it to me that I can remember. I wasn't trained on that, but that was a very meaningful time for him, was to receive communion at home, especially when he was no longer able to receive it at the church, okay? Now, more recently, after I became an Episcopal priest at my church now in Tombstone, this is a little over a year ago, a very nice lady in our congregation fell ill and needed some surgery. So I went to the hospital, the local hospital, and went several times just to visit her. And we had talked. And when it seemed like her treatment would need to escalate to a more serious approach, then I realized, okay, I should probably start talking about the gospel with her now. Make sure that she really understood, what the scriptures teach and what Christ had said. And we went through it point by point. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 talks about the gospel, how it's defined. St. Paul tells us that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, and he rose again on the third day according to the scriptures. There were even eyewitnesses that went on to see the resurrection of Christ. And then, of course, in Romans chapter 1, verse 16, St. Paul tells us that gospel right there is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. So I went through those points with dear sister Sunny, and she was right on board with it. I mean, she understood it all. My job was easy, really, thanks to, I guess, some previous good teaching that she had received at the church. She did understood, those important points, those principles of the gospel. And so we prayed together a few times, and then finally she was moved on to a different hospital farther away, moved to a Tucson, and so it was about 70 miles from where she was previously, and so I wasn't able to visit her as much, but when I did get out there, I continued to pray with her, and then finally she had her operation, and I went to go visit her, and it was obvious after her surgery that she was not going to make it through. And I had my Book of Common Prayer with me, and upon talking with some folks, in the family, it became very clear that we needed to go through the ministration at the time of death liturgy found on page 462. So one thing that worked well was that I took charge of the situation. I got in there, called the family together there in her room by her bedside. I said something like, folks, let's go ahead and offer these final prayers for her. These are the last rites. We call it in our tradition the ministration at the time of death, but I'd like to ask that you join me with me in these prayers for our Sonny. And they were so eager to do so. I tell you what, it was like a weight just dropped off of their backs. When I showed up, in my collar, ready to go and to pray with Sonny. And I also felt that the liturgy was a little too short. I wanted to stretch it out some, so I actually added in the 23rd Psalm during the readings. So I brought my little Bible with me, and as I got started at one point, I set my Book of Common Prayer aside, read Psalm 23. King James Bible, I believe, is the most beautiful translation of that. And then afterwards, we concluded the prayers, and it was a very lovely experience for everyone there. Sunny was sedated; she was pretty much unconscious, not able to respond to what was going on. But later on, her husband approached me a few months later, and he thanked me that I went through all that effort just to come out and to pray with her. In fact, I didn't even tell him all the times that I showed up to pray, but I think he found out from his wife that I kept coming out. So that's one thing I would do differently next time is after each visitation, let the family know that you come on out. So I'm talking out to other priests, but do let them know that you are coming out to minister, and I think they would really appreciate that as well. Even if they're not able to join you, at least they'll be happy knowing that someone came and prayed with their loved one. But so this is the nice thing about the Book of Common Prayer is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. When I was a Baptist minister, didn't know what I was doing when I showed up to minister, to the gentleman in hospice care. But I guess that's one of the nice changes when I switched over to becoming an Anglican is that I do have a good resource in the Book of Common Prayer. So anyhow, I'm going to stop here. If anyone else has any other good tips about how to minister effectively to people who are near death, please go ahead and leave a comment, because I do want to learn from the best practices that my other fellow ministers have. Thank you.